stand. I will stand. Who's 7?
I'm Cam Banks, and I'm the creative director at Margaret Weis Productions. I've been at the company since about 2007. I started as managing editor and took on the job of lead line developer, creative director a couple of years ago. My responsibility as creative director is to oversee the creative talent that goes into making the game. I need to make sure that we have the right people writing the books, outline everything, put forward what the plan is and the specific assignments that people have to write. For the basic game, a lot of that was done by me, the writing, but before we even started doing the game, I had 5 concept team members come along, and I had them all assigned to write some kind of reference document. Give me an ideas piece about Marvel that I need to take and then use to help create the game. Once the game is in place, the creative director, I can then step in and become a developer as well. So I have all this material that comes in, the editorial team is looking over it, I'm developing the rules some further. The consistency and the coherency of the rules is paramount for these sorts of things. So I oversee all of that, but yes, a lot of the vision and a lot of the actual ideas and design starts with me, and that's a pretty important job, I think. Yeah, so when I was a kid in New Zealand, which is a long way away from the States, about 10 or 11 years old, a lot of my friends were playing D&D. And we would share the rule books and pass them around, and some of us would buy them, others would just like go to his house and play. I think I first got my love for designing games when I had to make homebrew characters and adventures and things for D&D. And as soon as other games came out, we picked them all up. We would just absorb every other game we could get hold of, right? So we would start trying to mash these games together. If you wanted to play a bit of Star Frontiers and D&D, we'd do that. And I think in the long run, throughout my teenage years, most of my play was not actually playing games exactly as they were written. We always used to tweak them as much as we could. The original Marvel Superheroes game came out in about '84 with the yellow basic set, and I was hooked after that. We ran that game. I played a little bit, but I mostly ran the game for about 6 years straight. Same campaign, kept going and going through into college. And I still have very fond memories of that. They sort of established that, along with a couple other games that came after that, to really sort of say, well, here's my design philosophy. Make the license work, make the fun work. The rules can be changed as long as you make it work better for the game you want to play. I think a good game is one that gives players the experience of what they're hoping to get out of it. That's a strange thing to say, but I think if you're playing something like Dungeons & Dragons, that game, we already know what that experience is supposed to be like. If you're playing it and you find it doesn't match that experience, then you will find yourself changing the rules, or you'll find yourself changing to a different game. So if you're a designer and you want people to play the game that you wrote, you need to hit that as well as you can. It's a sort of idea of what's the expectation of the reader, the gamer. And I think design is something which needs a whole lot of testing. You should always try and play test your game. And I'm fond of people who play games as well as actually write them. For a while, I think a lot of people just ended up finding, I have no game group, so I'll just design games and see how that works. It's still important to get someone, if it's not you, someone should be playing it. The idea of doing the Marvel Universe as a comic book-based license came out. We were both sides. I think we were very interested in this. Although I think early on we weren't sure, well, is that going to work out? How will it work? But the excitement and enthusiasm that I had just from writing out the pitch documents and saying, here's what we want to have. How about having this book or this book? This kind of thing. And after you have an initial pitch, you have a conversation with the licensor. You say, is this going to line up with what you want to do in the future? Does this line up with what you think that the fans of the company's property want? With Marvel, we knew that we had some good sales numbers and other things to look at, but also popularity in the media itself. Our first event book, The Civil War, which is by many, many ways ahead, is one of the most popular Marvel events of all time. And I'm looking forward to having that come out because it's an opportunity to show off how role-playing games give you that toolbox for changing the story the way you want to do it. I mean, the whole tagline for Civil War was, whose side are you on? And so really that's what happens with the game. Whose side do you want? You choose. You also deal with the personal issues of your own character's life and other kinds of things as well, which is what Marvel's always been good at. Marvel's been good at family, it's been good at personal issues, it's been good at epic scope, but really comic book as opposed to supers. And when I say that, I mean that in some games you create a superhero character and you work in this sort of real-world type physics engine, where we threw a lot of that physics engine out. We replaced it with what the comic book universe works with. And I think with Marvel, a lot of descriptive narrative attention is played on whether your character is doing something for whatever reason, why they're doing it, and what the consequences are when they make these important, meaningful decisions in their character's life. So, yeah, it hinges a lot on that sort of, what do I do next? And part of why I like Civil War as the first thing is that's the kind of a major, meaningful choice that you have to make. Well, whose side are you on? Carries over to everything Marvel does. When we looked ahead and see what kind of products we wanted to tie in these major events to Marvel Comics events. Civil War was the first. Second one we have is I wanted to go with a cosmic style storyline, and Annihilation is one of my favorites. It's recent, it's quite wide, broad spanning, many, many characters involved. So Silver Surfer, Nova, Galactus, Thanos. And then after that, we wanted to go back in time a little bit and go retro. So Age of Apocalypse is the third of our events. I like to say it's the event you want to have if you want to play characters with huge shoulder pads and strange facial tattoos. It's awesome. Lots of big hair too. And we're huge fans of Age of Apocalypse, and they're also bringing back some of that now in tie-out spin-off comics. So I think it's very timely, and I think it'd be a lot of fun. Very different from the other two books.
buys the envy of lesser men, which will be all of them. Mullen.
My name is Amanda Barron, and I work with Geek Chic.
Okay, tell me about Geek Chic.
Geek Chic is a custom hardwood manufacturing company in Everett, Washington. We don't build anything until it's ordered. We make coffee tables, dining room tables, comic book storage. We have GM's valets, that are these rolling writing desks. About 5 to 8 months from start to finish, and then we hand deliver and set up in your home. Geek Chic was more of a necessity than anything else. We're gamers, we're geeks. We spend lots of time playing Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, board games, card games, and normally the largest surface in your house is your dining room table. We wanted to make something that was multifunctional, something that you could save your game in, and yet also be an heirloom quality piece of furniture. So that's kind of where Geek Chic started. Heirloom quality means it's all hardwood. We don't use any laminates. It's something that is generational, something that you can pass down to your kids. Go to our website and make a deposit, and that gets your place in line. Our current wait time is about 1.5 months, and then you enter your manufacturing queue. When we manufacture, it's another 3 to 4 months. And then our logistics manager gives you a call and sets up a delivery time. And we drive it out to your house and set it up for you.
I'm Kenneth Hite. I primarily write and design tabletop role-playing games, which I've been doing since 1991 professionally and since 1996 full-time. I've worked on a lot of GURPS books, GURPS Alternate Earths, GURPS Infinite Worlds, the last two versions of GURPS Horror, GURPS Cabal. I've done worked on both the Star Trek games from Last Unicorn and from Decipher as a lead designer. I developed the original series Star Trek role-playing game from Last Unicorn. Most recently, I've been working a lot with Pelgrane Press. I wrote Trail of Cthulhu and the brand new Knights Black Agents, which is in pre-order now. Jason Bourne versus Dracula is the elevator pitch for that one. At some level, the whole reason to become a professional writer, as opposed to just writing for your blog or writing for your fanfic or whatever it happens to be, is that you are inviting someone else's judgment, right? And ideally a judgment that comes in the form of a check, but also you're putting it out there. And someone who actually has to pay for your words is not going to pay for the words if you're not at least a certain level of competence. It's just not going to happen. So at the very least you can say, whatever else I may think about it, White Wolf thinks my words are worth 4 cents a word. That's something. You know, Weird Tales thinks my words are worth 3 cents a word, whatever it is, right? Again, you're not going to, you know, get rich on it, but that, you know, you can get that worth from, you know, being paid for it. You can get that worth from people, you know, going online or whatever. But at some level, if you don't think you should be a writer and you're capable of discouraging yourself from writing, then maybe you shouldn't be a writer. I mean, Heinlein's great quote, "Writers write." If you don't think you're writing, then you're probably not a writer. If you're, I mean, I think everybody looks at a project and says, gosh, if I'd had another 2 weeks, or if I'd had another, you know, pass, or if I'd known then what I know now, or whatever it is, you know, I don't think any book comes out of the press perfect, and that includes everything, you know, up to Tolstoy necessarily. But I think that if you're going to allow your own doubt to get in the way of the words, then you're going to allow anything else to get in the way of the words. And if the words don't come out, then you're not a writer. So it's sort of a tautological answer. I mean, if you've written well enough to overcome your own doubts, you're obviously capable of overcoming your own doubts. But but you know, the bottom line is, you know, if you think that what you've written is you know, a con job on the editor and publisher, and that it's terrible, and that, you know, somehow they haven't seen through it, resolve to write a better version of the con job next time. You know, take one flaw that you see and you say, all right, next time it's not going to be as obviously ripped off of Fritz Leiber as next time. You know, it's going to be, you know, I'm going to put in more and different paragraph lengths. You know, whatever it is you think your problem is, try and fix it. That's what real work people do, you know, whatever they're doing. S. John Ross, who was a terrific writer and game designer, came up with them. He and I talking, you know, back in the 90s, and he said, "Oh, Ken, here's the 5 Fs, and this is you don't go far from those." And he was right. And the 5 Fs are familiarity. The players have to be able to understand the setting so they can get into it. Freedom. You have to be able to, you know, go off on your own and be an adventurer group. You can't be, you know, locked into a single discipline or a single, you know, location necessarily. Friends. It should support multiplayer gaming, character story arcs. So no, you know, solitary hero wandering around. That's why it's very hard to build, for example, a Conan game or a Indiana Jones game, because you've got one hero, and then what do I play? Short round? That doesn't sound like a plan. Fantasy or fulfillment of wishes, depending on how you want to put it, but it should be something, you know, that you can't do anyway. It's something escapist, something with magic or spaceships, or, you know, something big and loud. You know, staking vampires, being a badass, you know, being Batman, whatever it happens to be. And finally, a fudge factor, or a fuzz factor. The GM should always have the freedom to be able to sort of turn it to the left, turn it to the right, throw in a new element if the game isn't working anyway. So the setting should have, you know, in Star Trek, technobabble, psionics, magic aliens from the Q dimension, whatever it happens to be. You just drop that in and you can change the rules and no one complains about it. In D&D, you can have, you know, gods and magic and demons. In Call of Cthulhu, you've got Azathoth or Nyarlathotep, or things that can change the rules of the game. You can go to the Dreamlands. So not all games do all 5 of those. Some games do one of them really, really well and sort of tie back on the other. So if you're playing the crew of a starship, you're suffering some freedom, but you've got huge scores on friends, familiarity, and fudge factor, and maybe a little bit on fantasy, depending on what your particular imaginary life is like. So a game should go as far down those 5 paths as it can, but you can certainly write a great game that really kills 1 or 2 of them. But the fewer of them you go down, the less accessible and probably the less successful your game's going to be. And if you want to be in the game business, in the hobby game business anyway, you need to know hobby games, play hobby games, go to hobby game conventions, meet hobby game publishers and designers, hang out on the internet at RPGNet or Board Game Geek or RPG Geek or wherever it is, and figure out what the market looks like. The great thing about role-playing games, at least right now, is it's never been easier to write and publish your own game. I mean, you write the game, you turn it into a PDF, you put it up on the internet, you are now a published game designer. You are the same as Luke Crane or Vincent Baker or me when I do Day After Ragnarok, or any number of people. Then by playing your game, playtesting it at conventions, showing it off, you get other people interested in your game. They begin to be the pull for your audience, and maybe you publish it. You look into self-publishing, see how much money it's going to cost you to print, how many copies you can print. You have to sort of teach yourself an awful lot if you go a self-publishing route. And then, you've done one game, you do another game, you do a third game. Now you've got a resume, a catalog, a ludography, and people start recognizing your name. You start going to conventions and they say, I want to play your new game. What are you building now? You can be part of that creative community without ever taking someone else's paycheck. The way to take someone else's paycheck is to find out what it is they want and start submitting. Most companies, Steve Jackson Games, for example, has a big website, What We Want. Go there, follow it to the letter, and if your stuff is any good, Steve Jackson Games will, send you a contract and you'll write a thing. It'll probably be a PDF-only product because they don't do a lot of dead tree game media in role-playing game space anymore, but they have a submissions process. Other companies have other submissions processes. Some do open calls. Some of them, it's just a matter of you've been an online presence who is useful and respectful and competent seeming enough that they'll risk saying, all right, can you do 2,000 words on this? You do those 2,000 words well, you do them on time, and you do them without kvetching, and then you'll get 4,000 words next. I mean, that's basically how I did it, is I sent Chaosium 10,000 words of playtest feedback on a game, and they said, these are terrific words, we'd like to publish them, what's the next thing you want to write for us? For Steve Jackson, I went to, back in the day it wasn't a website, it was a little piece of paper that said what we want, and I wrote what I wanted to sell him, in that format. I sent it to him, and a couple of years later, he got back to me and said, hey, that thing you sent me, that was pretty great. I'd like to do that. But I went to Gen Con every year, and so Steve Jackson knew who I was. I wasn't just some random stalker in the mail. I was a human being. So it's like every other business. You have to, indicate that you want to be part of it. Show up for the interview. The great thing about gaming is you don't have to show up for the interview in a tie.